Now raise your hands if you have one lens only. You're in the right place. Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. Thomas Love here from beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, where I teach street photography classes and night photography downtown. Over the course of the years, I saw my students were using different cameras, starting with compact cameras, then transitioning to DSLRs, and now they all have a mirrorless camera. It's not by chance if my very first question I always ask is, what camera will you be using and what lens, and for how long have you been using it? Because I really want to understand the kind of relationship you have with your gear. When they tell me what camera they use, they proudly show me they are shooting in manual mode because a lot of tutorials came out and now everybody's shooting in manual. I'll tell you the very first thing you need to know for street photography. You might find yourself using the aperture priority mode 90% of the time. Let's talk about Johnny for a minute. Johnny had a super duper Sony mirrorless camera with his 35mm f1.4 G Master lens. He was very proud of it, but you know what? Johnny didn't know it, but he didn't need the eye tracking autofocus he was very proud of. Why? Because with street photography you will be using an f-aperture of f8 most of the times, varying from f5.6 to f11 according to lighting conditions. With an f-aperture of f8, not only your subject will be sharp and in focus, if you're fast enough, but also the surroundings will be in focus. As many other things, being a good photographer depends heavily on how long and how often you can practice. So I put together a few info, the main important aspects, and a few examples for us to review and discuss together. You can find all the information thoroughly explained in my book, Tell a Story with Street Photography Down to Earth, available at your local bookstore or on Amazon for your convenience. Link down here. Please let me know if the explanations are thorough and well explained enough, or if you want me to focus on other aspects, you can comment down here and let me know. And if you get any value out of this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, click the bell so you will get a notification anytime a new video comes out. Let's tackle the basics step by step. First and foremost, the exposure triangle. It is a correct metaphor. We refer to it as a triangle because every time you stretch one dimension, the other two need to be adjusted. As we said earlier, 90% of the times you will be shooting in aperture priority mode. What does it mean? You first choose your f-aperture, let's say f8. With f8, your subject will be in focus, and we also want to see the surroundings because it is important to understand the scene, what is happening and where it is happening. Now, if you want to freeze the scene, you will need to have a shutter speed of at least 1/250th of a second. And so in order to have that shutter speed, you will have to use the ISO balancing. So please don't take the ISO too high, otherwise you will be introducing grains in the darker areas, and don't have an f-aperture too wide, otherwise you will not see the surroundings of the scene and where it is happening. Let's assume you are now walking down the street and you want to take a picture because something gathered your attention and you want to freeze that moment, and you double check your camera to be at least 1/250th of a second with an f-aperture of f.8 and with the ISO which are the lowest as possible. You want to frame, you want to study video composition, you want to check your surroundings so you don't have people coming in or out your framing, and you take a picture. You got that. The remaining times you will find yourself using shutter priority mode. As an example, if you want to practice with motion blur because a guy is passing by with a nice motorbike and you only want that guy and that motorbike in focus while you want all the surroundings to be blurred, you are following that guy with the motion of your torso just to be sure you are not introducing also vertical blur, and you set your camera at, let's say, 1/20th of a second. You would have chosen the ISO beforehand, and then the camera chooses the f-aperture for you accordingly. ISO, we said you have to choose them, don't put them in manual. Unless you have a recent camera where you can say the max ISO you want to use. Let's say you want to have it capped at 3200, just to avoid having too much grain in your pictures. As a rule of thumb, I would use the ISO at the lowest value possible. If your camera has a lowest value of 100, then start with ISO 100 and then you can boost it a bit if you need to. I trust you can do better than your camera. Let's now talk about lenses. It is what it is, you have what you have, but the discussion is still ongoing. Whether 35 or 50mm is the perfect lens for street photography. 50mm is a good argument because you will not have distortion. It is exactly fair and square what your eyes see. You don't have converging buildings, you will not have funny face expressions. While with 35mm, you will have a few more elements included in your framing, and this is why it was so common with journalists and street photographers a few years ago. And you won't even need a telelens, because if you start using a 85, 100, 200mm, that you dive too much into the scene. You will only focus on your main subject, but you're not sharing any other information with the observers. Let's say you have a fairly wide lens, like a 28mm or a 35. You don't need it to be very fast, because we saw the f aperture you will be using is not what you need to have a bokeh effect. Let's assume you have a kit lens, or even a better one, like a 24-70 f2.8. f2.8 lens at f5.6 is very, very sharp. The max aperture is intrinsic with each lens, so don't worry about that, you have what you have. As a general rule, the fastest the lens, the bigger, the heavier, and the most expensive. A gimmick here to have a fast shutter speed and to avoid pumping too much the ISO value is to find inspiration in parts of the city where the illumination is helping you. So if you're shooting overnight, this is why you see a lot of silhouette shots in street photography. While during the day you can help yourself with reflections. Let's now talk very, very quickly about a couple of aspects that you cannot manage because you're not in the studio. You cannot use the lighting gear to change the outcome. Are you having a soft light or a hard light today? Hard light is when the sun hits directly your subject and you're having pronounced shadows, while soft light, you can have it before sunrise, after sunset, in the shades of buildings, in covered markets, during cloudy days if you're outdoor, and it gives you not so pronounced nuances of colors. The other thing you cannot control is your subject having front lighting or backlighting? And in the case of a backlighting, will you be able to change the metering mode accordingly in order to avoid missing the shot? Go check on your camera where the metering mode command is, so next time you need to change it, you know what to do. Sorry, we discussed a lot of technicalities. In the next video we see together a few things like framing, compositions, and finally how to tell a story with street photography. So now you're ready. Go out and start practicing. If you like the video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, comment down here, let me know what you want me to discuss, and I guess I'll see you later.